The story begins with humanity on the brink of total destruction. The evil god Wind Drake suddenly appeared leading a countless horde of monsters. Chaos and death fell upon this land. The monsters ran to fight with weapons at the ready. The earth shook under their feet. However, there was still hope for the people. 5 of the strongest magicians challenged the evil god. The main character Setsuna directed magic from his hand into many monsters. Evil monsters of different races rushed towards the magicians. One of them commanded the others to get ready. The enraged magicians directed all their power towards the monsters. Setsuna put his hand forward and angrily called out to the evil god Wind Drake. He approached him and heard that this was where his end would come. The magician began his chant for everyone to unite the 6 magical attributes and attack at the same time. A powerful explosion of the elements was directed towards the god Wind Drake. One of the magicians ordered to help their leader Setsuna. All the magicians simultaneously pierced the god Wind Drake with their beams. The magicians, with beads of sweat on their surprised faces, wondered if they succeeded. A cloud of smoke covered the ground around from which a living god was visible. He rose up menacingly, looking at the magicians, who thought with surprise that this was impossible. One of them says that this is not the end, ordering to attack more powerfully. Setsuna asks his comrades to wait, saying that they need to take a closer look. All the magicians again directed their beams towards Wind Drake, who stepped back a little and did not get hit. Setsuna thought, did he dispel the magic? The formidable Wind Drake, turning to the magicians, asks, is this all that they people are capable of? Looking at the mages standing in fighting stances, God says that they are pathetic insects that should just rot in his garden because they are pathetic, stupid creatures. One of the mages with a frightened face said that it cannot be that their magic does not work on him. Her partner asks Setsuna what he will order them to do. He, with an irritated face, cries out that this cannot be, thinking that there must be something that they can still oppose him. One of the mages is thrown aside by the blow. The rest of them look at him in horror. They are surrounded by a horde of many monsters. The mages, seeing this, stood in fighting stances ready to fight back. One of the mages, turning to Setsuna, says that she is running out of mana. She asks him for help being captured by a monster, while the second asks the snake attacking her not to come closer. A moment later, the girl is swallowed by a snake-like monster from whose mouth only her legs are sticking out. Setsuna, looking at this in horror, orders the monsters to stop extracting magic from his hands with all his strength. Sneaking up from behind, God swings towards him with the intention of striking. Bloody Setsuna falls to the ground. As Setsuna lay on the ground, he looked at the world around him. His destruction seemed inevitable, and he wondered if humanity had already lost. Vidra sneered, declaring that all their struggles were in vain, yet Setsuna refused to accept it was over. With the last of his strength, he launched a simple punch at Vidra, surprising himself when the attack actually affected the death god, if only slightly. He was shocked to see that such a low-level close combat punch had worked on the death god and that not even the death god could disintegrate it. But it was too late. Setsuna's body was failing him, and he knew he wouldn't be able to continue. Vidra prepared to strike the final blow, taunting him that the playtime was over. Just then the pendant Atsuo wore began to glow. It reminded him of the gift from his headmaster. His headmaster had once told him that it was the emblem of resurgence, housing the spirit of the tower within it. The pendant would give him a chance to undo a past regret, should he ever have won. Setsuna thought for a moment. He had never regretted anything in his life, so he wasn't sure he'd ever need it. His headmaster, reading his thoughts, had simply smiled and said, as expected of the academy's top graduate, "But remember, there may come a time when you will need this." Setsuna stopped, reminded by his thoughts that his only regret was not taking the path of close combat magic that day. The next time he swore he would surely defeat Vidra. Suddenly, he found himself back in a familiar classroom where he had been sleeping. He jolted awake, startled by Leo's hit. Leo told him it was his turn. Setsuna was surprised to see Leo, remembering that he had disappeared before the death god had come. Looking around, Setsuna realized he was back at the Mage Academy. It seemed as though he had traveled back 10 years in time to the day of his bitter defeat with a chance to change everything and vanquish the death god. Leo urged him again, asking why Setsuna was so preoccupied in the middle of the ritual of choice. Setsuna snapped back to the present and agreed, walking to the front of the class where several teachers along with the headmaster were standing. A girl whispered to another that Setsuna was here, and the second girl added that he had an aptitude for multiple paths of magic. The man in front of Setsuna opened a book, emitting a soft light. Setsuna remembered that there were different paths of magic, each with its own unique set of spells. Once a mage chose a path to specialize in, it would be difficult to learn spells from other departments. It was much like trying to believe in two different religions at once. The man in front of him asked him to choose the path in which he wanted to specialize. The man displayed his skill confidently, telling Setsuna that he was sure he would choose it. Setsuna thought for a moment. Normally, he would have chosen a path of ranged magic, which involved creating elements to use mana and fire at opponents. It allowed mages to keep their distance from enemies, minimizing the risk of being attacked. And it could wipe out multiple opponents at once with wide area spells. He would become the strongest mage if he chose ranged magic, but that wouldn't be enough against the Death God. As Setsuna turned away from the ranged magic option, everyone was shocked. Leo, standing nearby, wondered what he was doing. Surely he was going to pick the ranged magic. They all questioned why Setsuna would choose melee magic, which seemed like the most useless option. The man explained that melee magic focused on strengthening the physical body. It was considered outdated and only effective in close combat. He compared it to someone being attacked by a swarm of arrows only to have a single rock to protect themselves. He asked Setsuna if he really wanted to destroy his future. Setsuna knew that by choosing melee magic, he was giving up any hope of becoming a renowned mage. However, this was the only magic that might help him defeat the Death God. He couldn't let go of that hope. The room fell silent as everyone watched him choose melee magic. They were shocked, but Setsuna was resolute. With this power, he would defeat the Death God. As Setsuna made his choice, there was a collective gasp of surprise, and the students began to chatter. Silas, the head of the ranged magic department, closed the book with a sigh, commenting that he had planned everything for Setsuna, believing he would choose ranged magic. In doing so, Setsuna would have become the greatest mage, and would have brought both fame and glory to Silas as his teacher. Setsuna, however, was unfazed by the murmurs around him. He knew that Silas's plans, while grand, wouldn't matter. In the next 10 years, the world had only 10 years left before destruction, and the Death God's first appearance was only 5 years away. Despite possessing all the memories of his past self, Setsuna lacked the experience needed for melee combat. He had no choice but to find a way to master it within the next 5 years. After the ritual was completed, the students were asked to return to their respective departments of magic. Setsuna, unsure of where his classroom was, wondered where he needed to go. He searched for Leo, but couldn't find him. He decided to ask a nearby boy for directions, but the boy, accompanied by a girl, brushed him off, quickly mentioning that they were running late. Setsuna observed the others, who were either already moving or ignoring him, whispering among their groups. He realized that the journey ahead wouldn't be an easy one, but he was determined to find his way. A boy nearby commented that the rumors about Setsuna being a prodigy might be wrong. Another boy guessed that Setsuna might just want to be the center of attention, which was why he chose melee magic. Setsuna reflected on how everyone at the academy was acting so differently from before, and he realized it was all because he had chosen melee magic. He decided to check the map, remembering that there was a map of the academy in the central garden. As he walked toward it, he heard someone casting a fireball and quickly realized it was a battle dot. A girl was defending herself from the attack, dousing the fireball with ease. She then confronted a boy, demanding that he hand over the item her mother had given her. 3 boys were bullying her, with the largest one holding a bracelet. He smugly claimed it was an artifact that contained mana. The second boy sneered, saying it was a waste to give it to a commoner like her, and that they would make better use of it. Setsuna quickly understood that the girl was from the melee magic department, and she was fighting against 3 students from the ranged magic department. The leader of the bullies raised his hand mockingly and told the girl that if she wanted the bracelet back, she'd have to take it from them using her useless melee magic. He then attacked her again with multiple fireballs. The girl responded by activating her physical boost, a core ability of melee magic, which enhanced her physical abilities. While an enhanced body could help her evade attacks, it would be useless if the opponent was out of range. Undeterred, she then summoned the power saved up by her mother for years to get her the bracelet. She asked them if they really expected her to just hand over such a precious item without a fight. She formed a mana blade, and Setsuna immediately recognized what it was. However, he doubted it would be enough to fight back against the three of them. The ranged magic department boy mocked her, claiming she was shaking in her boots and wondering if she could even reach him with that short blade. He attacked again with a fireball, forcing her to fall back. He taunted her, saying it was just as he had predicted, she wouldn't even be able to touch them. Then, with a cruel smirk, he released another fireball, asking if that wasn't the perfect analogy for her entire life. As the fireball was about to strike her, Setsuna rushed forward, lifting the girl out of harm's way. He asked if she knew where the melee magic classroom was and if she could show him the way. One of the boys realized it was Setsuna, who had stepped in and guessed that he had chosen melee magic as well. The leader boy smirked, saying that it was good news. Now he could crush Setsuna at his leisure. Setsuna stood his ground, calmly stating that he knew melee magic was considered weak, but since he had chosen it for himself, he would find a way to use it. He added that the outcome of a battle wasn't solely dependent on the magic a mage used. The girl, worried for him, begged him to stop, reminding him that they were seniors and he might get hurt. But the boy attacked, launching multiple fireballs at him, declaring that it was already too late. Setsuna focused, using his physical boost to concentrate his mana into his legs. He shot forward, dodging the fireballs with incredible speed. He thought that this would be easy, but as he moved, he wondered what would happen if he tried something more. He noticed the boy was only using fireballs, which led him to believe that fire was the only element the boy could control. The boy shouted at him to shut up, angrily questioning how Setsuna was moving so fast. He swore he wouldn't be beaten by Setsuna. The boy, now furious, created an even larger fireball with both hands, preparing to attack with all his power. Setsuna, however, summoned a sword from his mana and slashed through the fireball, leaving the onlookers stunned. The girl, wide-eyed, asked if it was possible to cut through a spell like that. Setsuna explained that a battle between mages ultimately came down to the control of mana. He recalled how even without a vast mana reserve, his precision in controlling his mana had made him one of the best. He felt the spell had more versatility than he had expected, and wondered what would happen if he combined speed with power. The boy gritted his teeth and declared that he would deliver an even more powerful blow. The fat boy warned him to stop, while the second boy cautioned that if the leader kept this up, an instructor might intervene. The boy ignored them, telling them not to stop him. He began chanting, and while he did, Setsuna rushed in, closing the gap in an instant. With a swift movement, he delivered a powerful mana fist to the boy, knocking him back. The boy stumbled back, and Setsuna clenched his fist, thinking how useful it would be in close combat. One of the boys wondered if melee magic wasn't the weakest magic, and the only difference was that Setsuna was wielding it. How had he become so strong? Setsuna then asked for the bracelet back. The fat boy reluctantly handed it over, deciding it was best not to escalate the fight further. The two boys then directed the injured one away. Setsuna returned the bracelet to the girl, telling her that it was precious to her. She squeezed his hand in gratitude and introduced herself as Lila Rosewell. She greeted him warmly and even extended her hand for a handshake. He introduced himself. As they shook hands, she swung it energetically, commenting that she knew he was famous and had an affinity for all paths of magic. Then she asked why he chose melee magic. Setsuna thought for a moment, knowing she wouldn't believe him if he told her the truth, and instead he asked if she could tell him where their classroom was. Layla wondered if the orientation for new students had already started. They both dashed off toward the location, and Setsuna felt something unfair about it. As a grant, Layla asked if he could teach her the mana blade he used earlier. Setsuna explained that he simply applied his ability to control magic to the technique. He thought that it should be possible to create various combat methods by applying this control in different ways. Since magic disintegration didn't seem to affect that technique, once he honed his skills in melee magic, he should be able to face the Death God. He also had another goal: to prepare for the inevitable invasion of the Death God. His thoughts wandered back to the past, to a moment when he was having tea with the headmaster. The headmaster had removed his gloves to reveal two advanced schools of magic, which shocked Setsuna. He learned that the symbol on the headmaster's right hand represented summon magic, but there was also a mysterious symbol on his left hand that Setsuna had never seen before. As Setsuna was about to ask about it, the headmaster replied that he would explain later in due time and that he trusted Setsuna with the secret. But Setsuna never got to learn the truth. The headmaster was assassinated shortly after the Death God's arrival. The culprit was the Death God himself, who had feared the headmaster's abilities. Setsuna believed that if he could uncover the secret of the second path of magic, it might give him the power to change the fate of the world. Layla led him toward a building, saying they had reached their destination. Setsuna pondered how he could catch the headmaster's attention with his melee magic. The instructor was frustratingly critical even though Setsuna hadn't been late. However, showing up with a girl seemed to have made things worse. As Layla was about to explain the situation, the instructor cut her off, declaring that the days of boasting about Setsuna's good grades were over. Stepping closer, the instructor sneered, reminding Setsuna that he was part of the melee magic division, an outcast in the academy. Annoyed, Setsuna brushed the instructor's hand aside, remarking that it was irritating to listen to him. He questioned why a melee magic instructor would belittle the very path of magic he was supposed to teach in. Infuriated, the instructor grabbed Setsuna's collar, demanding to know how he dared to talk back. Setsuna remained unfazed, stating that melee magic held great potential. That was precisely why he had chosen it. The instructor scoffed, wondering how long Setsuna could maintain his arrogance. Turning away, he issued a challenge. If Setsuna truly believed in melee magic, he should prove it. Nearby students were attempting to break a large stone with their magic. One boy stumbled backward after striking it, realizing it hadn't even left a scratch. The instructor shouted at the class, asking what they were doing. This was their first test to determine their skill level. He explained that inside each rock was a crystal the size of a fish, and their task was to extract it within the time limit. Failure would result in punishment. As the allotted time neared its end, none of the students had even made a dent. One of them complained that the rocks were far too hard, while a girl wondered how they were expected to succeed when they had only just begun learning. Another boy speculated that the instructor was taking out his frustration on them because he hadn't been promoted. The instructor then singled out Setsuna, leading him to the largest rock and challenging him to demonstrate what melee magic was truly capable of. He gave him only 10 minutes. Layla was shocked, pointing out that the rock was even bigger than the others, and that 10 minutes wouldn't be nearly enough. The instructor merely smirked and showed the timer, noting that a full minute had already passed while they were talking. Setsuna stepped forward, placing his hand on the rock. The instructor scoffed, asking if he really believed he could do it. Mockingly, he offered extra time if Setsuna begged for forgiveness. But Setsuna simply stated that he will finish it in 10 seconds. The instructor was taken aback, and even Layla urged him not to be ridiculous. The instructor thought to himself, not only was the rock massive, but it was also incredibly dense. Even he would need at least 30 minutes just to make a dent. But Setsuna wasn't backing down. He had only 10 seconds. With a determined look, he summoned a light weapon into his hand. If he wanted to catch the headmaster's eye, he needed to become the top student in melee magic. Without hesitation, he slashed at the stone, knowing he couldn't waste time on trivialities. After Setsuna struck the stone, nothing happened for a moment. The instructor, Zack, shouted that he had known it. While Setsuna had potential, he was still just a student. Suddenly, the stone broke into pieces. Setsuna handed the purple stone to the instructor, remarking that he was right about the 10 seconds. The instructor was stunned, and Layla couldn't believe it either. She wondered how Setsuna had managed to extract the stone so effortlessly. The other students were equally amazed, some speculating that Setsuna might be stronger than their instructor. One boy even questioned if Setsuna was more powerful than Zachary himself. However, the instructor dismissed this idea, blaming Setsuna for using some kind of trick, claiming that 10 minutes wouldn't be enough to break such a dense rock. There was no way he had done it fairly. Setsuna responded coolly, saying that if it took Zachary 10 minutes to do it, then maybe he should also attend lessons with the other students. Zachary, visibly angry at the remark, was about to retort when another teacher, Lionel, appeared. Grabbing Zachary by the collar, Lionel asked if he was bullying the students. Yan Lil continued, saying that Zachary's antics had actually made him wake up. He clarified that Setsuna hadn't cheated. Instead, he had sensed the flow of mana within the rock and struck it at its weakest point. Lionel scolded Zack, wondering how an instructor could be so ignorant of such basics. Lionel turned to the students, announcing that Zachary would now demonstrate the mana guard. Taking a battle stance, Leo remarked that since Zachary was so confident in his training, he was sure the demonstration wouldn't kill him. Zachary, now visibly worried, protested, but Lionel shoved him back, sending him crashing into the building wall some distance away. Setsuna understood that Leo had broken through Zack's mana guard with ease. Realizing just how formidable Lionel was, Lionel then clapped Setsuna on the back, praising him for his impressive skill. He said that for melee magic that's more than enough and Setsuna didn't need to push himself too hard. Setsuna replied firmly that he didn't intend to lose to any other department and he would aim to be the top student and surpass everyone. Lionel chuckled at Setsuna's determination. That's the spirit, he said, wondering if there was a particular spell Setsuna was interested in learning. If so, he would gladly teach it to him. Lionel then thought to himself, recalling a similar mindset in a previous student. He mused that Setsuna might one day represent the department, but for now he was a rival who could not be underestimated. Introducing himself, Lionel declared he was the head instructor of the melee magic department and he welcomed them all. And today, they were selecting the representative for the upcoming intramural contest. Even though it's early, the intramural contest was a competition between the 8 magical departments, each battling for honor. Every department would select its representative, and these chosen individuals would face off in a tournament-style format. Setsuna remembered that before traveling back in time, he had won the contest for the range magic department, earning the headmaster's confidence. This was the reason he wanted to become the representative again. However, Setsuna noticed a fortified rock nearby. Lionel informed him that not only had he shown the mana crystal, but there was another student who had extracted a similar one using only his fist. Setsuna realized that both pieces of rock had come from this student Drago. Drago approached Setsuna, calling out to him and wondering why someone like him, a prodigy, had joined the melee magic department. Setsuna replied that there was a reason he needed to learn it. Drago raised his voice, scoffing at the idea. He asked what Setsuna hoped to accomplish with such a frail body. Drago then revealed that his family had studied melee magic for generations, and that he had been under intense physical training for 17 years. He suddenly unleashed his power, causing the ground to tremble, as he punched the air with such force that everyone could feel the pressure. With a smug expression, he struck at Setsuna's face, challenging him to a duel. He declared that if Setsuna wanted to become the representative, he would have to prove his strength and determination. Setsuna reminded Drago that the intramural contest was a test of skill, and as the sole student of renown in the melee magic department, he was already a contender. Setsuna agreed to the duel. Before things could escalate further, Lionel stepped in, announcing that the duel would be scheduled 1 week from that day. Drago warned Setsuna not to back out, telling him that if he called himself a melee mage, he should fight honorably. As Drago left, one of the boys wondered who would win the duel, while the girl expressed her confidence in Drago's victory. Layla, however, asked Setsuna if he was sure he could defeat Drago. Suna shook his head, thinking that Drago's powerful body, honed through years of training, was far too much for him to handle right now. Still, he left with the belief that there was a way. Layla, puzzled, asked where he was going. Curious, she decided to follow him. They made their way into the forest, stopping in front of a giant tree. Layla still didn't understand what was going on. Setsuna touched the tree, revealing that this was his secret training spot. Whenever he trained here, his strength increased threefold. She mentioned that it was an incredible tree. Setsuna explained that it was the world tree, which had been rooted for millennia. The green light emitted by the tree enveloped Setsuna, accepting him as one of its own, and he too was bathed in the same light. Layla was curious about the light, and Setsuna explained that was the blessing of the world tree, which had the effect of accelerated recovery for those accepted by it. He believed he had found this place before traveling back in time. With the world tree's blessing, he no longer needed to worry about running out of mana. He could enter different worlds and undergo training that pushed him to his physical limits. Layla was amazed, but she knew that Drago had been a melee mage since birth. She felt a strong desire to repay Setsuna for returning her bracelet, so she decided to help him by spying on Drago. The scene shifted to the melee magic training room, where a few students, including Drago, were training.
Layla walked around observing. Drago was performing exercises with an immense amount of weight. After finishing, he asked Lionel if there were any fortified rocks left. Lionel asked if Drago planned to smash every single one of them. Drago responded that it wasn't about smashing, he was simply borrowing them. He placed a significant amount of weight on his back and began doing push-ups. Lala watched in awe, wondering if Drago was even human. She questioned whether he was truly this strong and wondered if a simple punch would be enough to challenge Setsuna. She researched whether Setsuna could hold his own against Drago. Meanwhile, Setsuna sat under a tree reading a martial arts manual. Layla approached him, telling him that it wasn't the time to sit and read. Drago was doing push-ups with 5 fortified rocks on his back. Setsuna agreed that Drago was incredible, but he pointed out that such intensity was an appropriate level for physical training. He reassured her that there was no need to worry, it was part of his training. Her eyes widened in curiosity. She asked what he meant. Setsuna explained that it was a spell called Physical Bodybuilder, which strengthened the body and allowed for greater control over the nerves by channeling mana. By concentrating mana in their legs, they could increase leg strength in their fists, they would gain greater power in their strikes, and if focused on their brain, would enhance memory. He tossed the book aside and told her do. He had already memorized all the techniques, so he was eager to test them out. He noticed a fallen leaf and with a swift kick used his power to cut it in half. He even created his sword-like force and sliced through the other leaves. Leah marveled at how incredible it was and how quickly he had learned those moves. Setsuna remarked that it wasn't merely enough, and suddenly he felt a sharp pain, causing him to drop to his knees. A wound had appeared on his hand. Leah wondered where the wound had come from, but Setsuna assured her that he was fine. Then the green light from the world tree enveloped him, and he explained that with the physical boost, he was intentionally pushing his muscles to their breaking point. He could focus on recovery, which would allow his body to grow stronger and heal faster. The wound healed before their eyes, and Leah asked if he really needed to go that far. Setsuna replied that he couldn't possibly catch up to Drago with normal training methods, since Drago had spent far more time training than he had. With only a week left before the duel, Setsuna was determined to repeat the process 1,000 times. Leah was surprised and asked how he could go through such tough training even once, let alone 1,000 times. Setsuna answered that it wasn't necessary to be perfect, but when he was training, he remembered the days when he couldn't even wield magic. He had dedicated himself to training every day, even when he failed many times. He never gave up on himself and kept growing, improving little by little. He could endure because as long as he knew he was getting better, it was enough. Afterward, they both continued training together, and during their rest, Leah thought about him. People often said he was born with talent, but in reality, he worked harder than anyone else. Currently, he was lifting an enormous amount of weight while doing push-ups. Finally, the day of the duel arrived. Setsuna stood against Drago in front of the battleground with a large crowd watching them. Drago commented that it was good Setsuna hadn't run away to hide. Setsuna responded that he wouldn't, and he truly wanted to be the representative of the department. Lionel asked if they were both ready, and as they glared at each other, he signaled the duel to begin. Setsuna immediately rushed to attack Drago. Setsuna delivered a left hook to Drago, who blocked it by using his hands as a barrier. Despite the defense, Drago was pushed back from the impact. Setsuna realized that Drago had used the mana guard to block the attack. Drago quickly retaliated with a punch so powerful that the pressure from it could be felt by the audience, leaving them unable to even see the attack coming. Leah was concerned about Setsuna. As the battle began to clear, it was revealed that Setsuna had effortlessly avoided the punch. The students watching the duel were stunned and wondered if the two of them had really undergone the ritual of the choice only a week ago. Setsuna told Drago that had the punch landed cleanly, he definitely would have taken some damage. Setsuna blocked and dodged them, which only angered Drago further. Drago growled, asking if defense was all Setsuna could do, taunting him for having such a weak body. Leah felt that the weaker training hadn't been enough for Setsuna to defeat Drago. Lionel observed that it seemed like Setsuna was losing the duel from the start. Drago launched another kick towards Setsuna, but Setsuna blocked it once again. Lionel noted that Setsuna was likely using his mana control to parry Drago's attacks. Drago, growing more irritated, snapped that elites like Setsuna always looked down on melee magic. He went on to say that his family had been belittled and humiliated simply because they were known for melee magic. In a surge of anger, Drago conjured a sword, declaring that he would defeat Setsuna for sure. Setsuna responded by summoning his own sword, and the two rushed toward each other, their swords clashing in a powerful strike. Drago followed up with several quick slashes, but Setsuna skillfully jumped and dodged each one. Finally, Setsuna landed a slash of his own. As Drago jumped to attack once again, Setsuna evaded, and the ground beneath him cracked with the force of their clash. As Drago charged again, Setsuna remembered the words of two boys who had criticized him for picking a fight with Drago and for choosing melee magic. Setsuna then told Drago that he understood where he was coming from, but he aimed for something greater. Drago, confused, didn't understand what Setsuna meant. With that, Setsuna broke through Drago's mana sword with a precise strike. Drago was momentarily stunned by the attack, but in the next instant he retaliated and struck Setsuna once more. Using the physical boost acceleration, Setsuna increased his speed and countered with an attack. Leah realized that Setsuna's attacks were starting to have an effect on Drago. Lionel thought that Drago was performing admirably, but said Setsuna's mana manipulation and physical boost were proving to be just as impressive. Lionel couldn't wait to see who would come out on top, knowing that to break through Drago's solid defense, Setsuna would need to create a gap. As Setsuna rushed to attack Drago, Drago conjured another sword, slashing at him in a fit of rage. Sensing the danger, Setsuna swiftly dodged the attack. Drago's strike hit the ground with immense force, shattering it. Seeing this, Drago smirked and confidently declared that Setsuna wouldn't be able to escape on those legs of his. Fueled by fury, he clenched his fists tightly, making Leah wonder what he was planning next. Drago charged forward and punched at Setsuna, but as the punch hit, it turned out to be nothing more than an afterimage of him. The real Setsuna was already in the sky.